booked a ticket to California and called Governor Evans from the airport. He remembers Evans' reaction when he told him he was headed to California.
If you see Governor Brown down there, just tell him what it says on the Statue of Liberty. And that's the words I left with.
Monroe landed in San Diego and drove to Camp Pendleton, where some of the first refugees were housed in tent cities.
As I came over the hill, I just could not believe. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of people in tents, open pit latrines, kids, adults, former generals, all the way down to, family members, cousins.
He found the commanding officer and told him he was from Washington State. Hundreds of refugees were invited to the state to begin new lives.
I think there were houses in these locations right around here.
The first families arrived at Camp Murray near Fort Lewis, where they were temporarily housed in tents on the property. Thousands followed, and Washingtonians stepped up to welcome them.
We went to work to find host families, and believe it or not, they responded from all over the state. Every corner of the state, people responded and said, "I'll help."
In the midst of all the work to help refugees resettle,
we were in Olympia one day, and a message came down from the camp here at Camp Murray that a baby had been born.
News of the first U.S. citizen born to Vietnamese refugees in Washington State.
Then we heard that the baby was named after the governor.
So this is where you were born?
Yes, it was, but definitely not where it's going to end.
That baby, Evans Nguyen, now 46 years old, married with 3 kids and a successful engineering director at a biomed genetics company outside Seattle. His parents escaped Vietnam in 1975, much like Afghans are doing today.
My father worked for the U.S. Embassy in a capacity, and we were on one of the first planes leaving before the fall of Saigon.
His parents had 5 children, and his mom was 8 months pregnant with him.
It was a very, sudden change to leave everything you knew and everything you had behind and go into the unknown.
Growing up, Nguyen's mother would share stories about their time at Camp Murray.
I believe when we were here, the weather was really hard for my parents, especially my mom. And she was not only pregnant with me, but my sister was 1 year older than me, so she was only 1 at the time. My mom and another lady would stay in the latrines at night because it was actually warmer than anywhere else.
The family settled in Renton, and Nguyen's father worked the night shift at a canning factory, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. His mother worked sewing curtains.
When my first son was born, I wrote a letter to my dad just saying, you had 6 kids at the age that I had 1, and I'm barely surviving with 1 with all the resources I have. I have no idea how he managed everything he did.
His parents watched their 6 children thrive. 4 were high school valedictorians. They've gone on to become doctors, mechanical engineers, and a director at Jeff Bezos' aerospace company, Blue Origin. Evan's sister is the founder and CEO of the company Nut Pods, which makes dairy-free creamers.
For the most part, America is still the place of choice, a place where people know they have a future.
Yeah, there's going to be more opportunities here than anywhere else.
Evans has a message for the Afghans fleeing their country for a new life in the U.S.
Remember that you belong here too now. This is your home. Make it your home, but also realize that, you have to contribute like everyone else before you. As a first generation, it's going to be hard, but you have every opportunity everyone else does too.
This is Fort Nisqually, just above the Tacoma Narrows in Pierce County. What a magnificent reproduction of our state's history. Where the British flag still flies as a location of part of the Hudson Bay Company, as they built many forts and gardens and areas to really develop the land all across America. And it wasn't until the Treaty of 1846 that the boundary was set on the 49th parallel. The British fought over this territory, the U.S. wanted this territory, the Russians wanted this territory. Everybody wanted this area because of this pelt. This is the skin or the pelt of a beaver or sea otters. These were incredibly valuable in Asia and back in Britain. This fort was originally located down where the town of DuPont is now, but it was moved here during the CCC days, the days of our depression in the 1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration had thousands of men that needed jobs, and this was an activity that they took up. They brought many of the buildings here, and the Park District has added to that, and now it's a living, vibrant history of Washington State life long before we were a state. This is a real educational location where kids can come, and they do by the hundreds. They see the various tools that were used. They experience what life was like in a fort in the 1840s and 1850s. They have reenactors that demonstrate the day-to-day activities. It's a wonderful place for education and a wonderful place for learning. Life was pretty simple in the 1830s, 1840s, but there were necessities. Early trappers and traders would come into the store here to buy beads to trade with the Indians, or perhaps playing cards to while away the evening hours, or an article of clothing that was needed. Fort Nisqually provided all the essentials, and this was a popular place. This is a Hudson Bay Company location, still in existence and one that we can still learn about. It truly is one of my favorite places.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Ever since that famous first step on the moon, lunar dust has not only been a nuisance, but a health hazard for astronauts.
The surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
It's made of crushed rock and damages everything from lunar landers to spacesuits to the lungs of astronauts if inhaled. Even worse, it has a magnetic quality. Noted almost immediately by astronaut Neil Armstrong when he stepped off Apollo 11 and onto the surface of the moon.
I can pick it up loosely with my toe. It does adhere in the fine layers like powdered charcoal to the sole and sides of my boot.
It's been more than 50 years since that infamous first step, and moon dust still poses dangers. It is fine, abrasive, and can even tear up spacesuits.
We are going.
But with NASA's pledge to return to the moon with the Artemis program by 2025, the agency put out a call to universities across the United States. The 2021 Big Idea Challenge asked students to design, build, and test technologies that could help mitigate lunar dust in the space shuttle cabin and everywhere else. Enter Ian Wells.
It's very nasty stuff, for lack of a better word.
an undergraduate mechanical engineering major at Washington State University.
I guess the first step happened in my garage back in my hometown of Boise, Idaho.
Wells had decamped to his family home during the pandemic. Working in a makeshift lab in his garage, he started taking pictures of airflow through a special imaging system that photographs fluids or gases at varying densities.
My boss wanted me to apply this to liquid nitrogen to try to see what exactly makes it pick up stuff, dust, twigs, anything that happens to be in its path.
His photography experiment helped set him up for exploring how liquid nitrogen might move materials in its path, materials like lunar dust. Back on campus, Wells formed a team to continue research.
I got it.
Undergraduates Lauren Rising, Nathaniel Sweats, John Bussey, and Camden Budakofer worked with Wells to determine how liquid nitrogen could be used to remove lunar dust from surfaces.
It was very difficult to figure out where to start, and that was something that took a lot of planning, and throughout the planning was where we each kind of found our own little niche in the project.
The project is based on the Leidenfrost effect, a physical phenomenon when a liquid contacts a surface that's temperature is beyond the boiling point.
This gas actually insulates small droplets and causes them to move. So we saw that these droplets were forming and they were moving, and we thought that it was primarily that.
So the WSU team set to work, advancing the idea of using liquid nitrogen to essentially move droplets of lunar dust from surfaces in spacesuits. But first, they needed to find a stand-in for their experiments.
One of the big issues with studying this is moon dust does not exist in large quantities here on Earth.
The team didn't have to look far for a substitute. Ash from Mount St. Helens. As luck would have it, the university was able to track down barrels of it, saved back when the mountain erupted in 1980. They tested the ash on a Barbie doll in a spacesuit. In November 2021, the students presented their solution, a liquid cryogen spray bar and a handheld sprayer to spray the dust from the spacesuits. Out of the 7 finalists from universities across the U.S., the WSU team took the top honors, the prestigious Artemis Award.
It was such an honor to be competing with such incredible schools in the first place, and to find out that we had won top honors was incredible. I know that all of us were very excited. We were jumping up and down.
The team was, to use a pun, over the moon, and grateful for the opportunity to showcase their hard work at a national level.
I would never expect as an undergraduate to be able to, do research for NASA, but to be able to have that opportunity, I think shows that we're going to have a lot of innovation coming from the younger generation, given those opportunities are now available.
And they're already thinking of what to research next.
There's a lot of resource potential utilization on the moon, things like helium that you can get off the moon that is really rare here on Earth to help enable and improve the human experience on Earth as well.
Wells says he hopes the recognition from NASA will inspire high school students to begin to think about space technology as a career option. Because with hard work and determination, a project that began in a garage during a pandemic could someday
It has a stark beauty all its own.
land on the moon.
It really is an honor for the Sun Dome to be the host of the largest piece of public art.
Circle of Light makes the building come alive. It really makes the building sing.
Washington State is made up of 281 unique cities and towns. Some are small and rural, others are large and urban, but each one plays a vital role in the health and prosperity of our residents and our state. That's why the Association of Washington Cities works for all of the cities and towns in our state, providing advocacy, education, and services to help communities thrive. Learn more by visiting wacities.org.
It really is an honor for the Sun Dome to be the host of the largest piece of public art.
Circle of light makes the building come alive. It really makes the building sing.
This is Fort Nisqually, just above the Tacoma Narrows in Pierce County. What a magnificent reproduction of our state's history. Where the British flag still flies as a location of part of the Hudson Bay Company as they built many forts and gardens and areas to really develop the land all across America. Most Washingtonians don't realize that once we were part of the British Empire. Everything north of the Columbia River was considered British, and it wasn't until the Treaty of 1846 that the boundary was set on the 49th parallel. The British fought over this territory, the US wanted this territory, the Russians wanted this territory. Everybody wanted this area because of this pelt. This is the skin or the pelt of a beaver or sea otters. These were incredibly valuable in Asia and back in Britain. This fort was originally located down where the town of DuPont is now, but it was moved here during the CCC days, the days of our depression in the 1930s, when the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration had thousands of men that needed jobs, and this was an activity that they took up. They brought many of the buildings here, and the Park District is added to that, and now it's a living, vibrant history of Washington state life long before we were a state. This is a real educational location where kids can come, and they do by the hundreds. They see the various tools that were used. They experience what life was like in a fort in the 1840s and 1850s. They have reenactors that demonstrate the day-to-day activities. It's a wonderful place for education and a wonderful place for learning. Life was pretty simple in the 1830s, 1840s, but there were necessities. Early trappers and traders would come into the store here to buy beads to trade with the Indians, or perhaps playing cards to while away the evening hours, or an article of clothing that was needed. Fort Nisqually provided all the essentials, and this was a popular place. This is a Hudson Bay Company location, still in existence and one that we can still learn about. It truly is one of my favorite places.
Tooth decay is the most common chronic childhood illness, but it doesn't have to be that way. Regular health visits and preventive oral health measures like sealants and community water fluoridation give kids a better chance to succeed at school, eat nutritious food, and thrive. At our Cora Foundation, we believe health equity and a cavity-free childhood are possible for every kid in Washington.
The history of our state really has a lot of boom and bust stories, especially about mining. In the late 1800s, prospectors scattered all over Washington state, every river and creek and valley, looking for gold, looking for silver. This is one of those locations here in Bodie, Washington, way up near the Canadian border on the eastern side of our state. You have to wonder when you walk into a town like this, who built these buildings? Who lived here? What was their story and where'd they end up? Just from what remains today, you know it must have been an exciting life. Over $1 million in gold was taken out of this town in this one mine. And the people here say that the creeks still run color, meaning they believe that there's still valuable gold hidden in these hills. Ghost towns are always interesting places, and this is just one of the ghost towns in our state. This one is one of my favorite places.
It was really scary. So
when the pandemic shut down schools, Dolores Anchetta was like any other parent, concerned for her elementary and high school age boys and worried about how she could continue working and make sure her own children stayed on track in online school.
I literally would walk upstairs and they'd both be asleep on the couch with their laptop on, teacher talking. And I'm like, okay, this ain't working, guys, you know?
She was particularly anxious about her older son, Moses.
He was getting to that point where he was like, I'm just done. I don't want to do this. This is dumb. Just get my GED. I've always told my kids since they were young, that wasn't an option. You had to graduate.
Anchetta was 17 and in the 11th grade when she got pregnant with her daughter. She knew back then she had to graduate.
That was literally the first year that I had all A's, and I was breastfeeding her, and I graduated when she was 6 months old.
If she could graduate as a new mom, Anchetta didn't want the pandemic to prevent her son from that same milestone. But Anchetta had concerns about other students as well. That's because she works in outreach for Chief Leschi Schools, the same school she graduated from more than 20 years ago. Leschi is the largest Bureau of Indian Affairs school in the Puyallup Tribe of Nations, with about 670 students in grades pre-K through 12th grade. Almost all of the students are tribal.
A lot of the kids respect us that way, and they come to us and they trust us, and they actually care about us and we care about them.
Before COVID, students were bused from all over, including King and Thurston County, making the shutdowns all the more isolating. Elders in the community got COVID and died. Leschi's attendance numbers dropped from 88% in the 2019-20 school year to a little over 70% the following year. Graduation rates at the school were low before COVID. Students, like Anchetta's son, were at risk of not graduating. But the school's administration got to work.
We've got many generations of graduates here.
Just months before the pandemic, Superintendent Mark Brulette began his first year at the district. His administration was already looking at major changes to improve student success and graduation rates. Administrators had begun a new program called Student Success. Employees like Anchetta would serve as a contact between families and the school.
They have great relationships in the community. They are well known. They knew most of the families or grandparents or brothers or sisters, and so that gave us a connection point into the homes of our students so that they could be accountable.
The first set of federal relief money went to purchase laptops for every student.
Because of our size, we didn't have to have 20,000 devices. We only needed 700 devices to make sure all of our students had a device to use.
A Career and Technical Education Program, or CTE, allowed students to participate in internships in entertainment, culinary, medical, and environmental sciences. Janine Medvedich is the Chief Academic Officer.
The truth of the matter is if you find meaning in what you do, then you have a purpose for completing. So I think that when we have powerful opportunities like CTE, they say, oh, now I understand how the math and the science and all of these pieces, these classes are going to tie in to doing something that I want to do well beyond high school.
Longtime Chief Leschi employee and alumni Bina McLeod is the Director of Student Success and Culture.
If one of us call, they go, "Oh, what did he do now?" Or "What did she do now?" You know, I'll talk to him when I get home. And so that was really the important.
The state auditor will be presenting recent reports on Washington's agricultural commodity commissions and assessment of effectiveness, and the state auditor's office 2022 cybersecurity report and critical infrastructure audit. A word about logistics. The House and Senate floor sessions went longer than we expected, and Senate and House members will be joining when they are done on the floor. The chair will ask members and participants mute their phones and computers to prevent any background noise. I think we can dispense with a roll call since I've already announced my name, and the legislative auditor, Eric Thomas, is with us, and other members will be joining us. It's a hybrid meeting in House Hearing Room A, and we have virtual participants via Zoom and being live streamed over TVW. We will ask anyone attending virtually to raise hand feature in Zoom if you have a question, and we will take public testimony after each presentation. Staff supplied information on registering for in-person and remote public testimony via Zoom on the JLARC website. And written testimony may be, and please do send written testimony to jlarc@leg.wa.gov and see the JLARC website for more information. And your written testimony will be shared with JLARC members and available to the public on the JLARC website. With that, I'd like to ask the State Auditor's Office to join us at the table and introduce yourselves, and we will begin with the Washington Agricultural Commodity Commission's assessment. Welcome.
How about now? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, member of the committee. My name is Shauna Good, and I'm today here with Hannah Yord to share the results of our recent performance audit that looked at the effectiveness of Washington's commodity commissions. Before we begin, I would like to just take a moment to thank the Washington Department of Agriculture, as well as the commodity commissions. WSDA staff were remarkably prompt and thorough with the information they provided, and the commissions also made the audit easier to conduct by being especially cooperative and helpful throughout the process. In this audit, we looked for opportunities to improve the value the commissions bring to the state's agriculture industry. And overall, we found opportunities in 4 primary areas. Commissions could improve the value they bring by providing more information to their producers and the public, by engaging more with producers to understand their perspectives, by engaging in coordinated marketing of the ag industry, and we also found opportunities for improvement with additional WSDA support. I'm sure you already know how important agriculture is to our state. Washington produces over 300 different commodities, second nationally in diversity of products only to California. Our ag is reliable because we have irrigation, such as that from Grand Coulee Dam, which was created for that purpose. Ag and food processing are a $32 billion industry in our state, supporting jobs and providing income in all 39 counties. Our 21 commodity commissions are technically state agencies, although tiny ones, and they were created to support the ag industry and to give producers a voice in their respective industries. They are governed by boards and funded primarily by taxes or assessments, which are paid by producers. By statute, WSDA oversees and assists the commissions by approving their budgets and programs annually, and also by conducting elections and referenda votes, among other things. Commissions primarily engage in promotion, market development, research and education for both growers and the public. Commissions are similar in some ways and very different in other ways. For example, all are funded to some extent by assessment funds, but the amount they collect, which is primarily based on their production, ranges from $6,500 annually for the Puget Sound Salmon Commission to nearly $8 million annually for the Grain Commission. Some derive all their revenue from producer assessments, and others derive only part or most of their revenue from assessments. One commission, the Beer Commission, only gets 5% of its revenue from its producers, and the rest comes from events. All commissions are run by boards, some elected and some appointed. Some were created by statute, and others by marketing orders through WSDA. Their focus also varies depending on the needs of the industry. Two, cranberry and tree fruit, focus exclusively on research. In this audit, we sought to understand the extent to which the commissions benefit the state's producers and the ag industry overall, and to look for opportunities to enhance those benefits. Rather than taking a commission-by-commission approach, we looked at a statewide approach overall to learn about processes such as how commissions communicate information, ensure all producers, both big and small, are represented, how they measure the results of their programs, and how they coordinate their efforts. We also partnered with Washington State University to develop a survey aimed at learning producer perspectives about things like their commission board's priorities, how well their board communicates with them and the quality of the information, and whether and how the board regularly solicits their feedback. Commission staff also helped us develop the survey, and we sent it out to around 14,000 producers. We got around a 10% response rate, which we were very pleased with. And in addition, the sample error was nearly zero, indicating that the survey findings are representative of the target population. I'm now going to turn it over to Hannah to talk about our results.
Thanks, Shauna. We found that most producers believe they do benefit from the commissions, and those that don't often said they were unaware of what the benefits are. We also learned that producers want more information about their commission's priorities and activities. We found that most commissions, but not all, have websites, and those that do have websites vary widely in the type of information they provide. We think that one online location with information about each commission's programs, budget, and contact information could help inform producers and the general public. We looked at whether commissions measured and reported the results of their programs, a process called performance management. Performance management is important for commissions because it helps them demonstrate that they are using producer assessment dollars wisely. We found that some commissions have extensively measured and reported program results, while others have done some or no measurement. We think that all commissions should measure and report program results. To help commissions in this process, SAO's Center for Government Innovation offered a free training to the commissions just yesterday to help them think about approaches to measuring and communicating their results. We found that while producers believe commissions value their input, they say they haven't been asked their perspective in recent years. We think WSDA should work with the commissions to survey producers from time to time. We provided commissions with the survey instrument that we built for this audit so that could serve as a starting point for future efforts. We heard from both commissions and producers that they believe growing demand for the state's commodities is key to their success. We found that most states have agricultural branding programs. Washington is just one of 7 states that does not. Studies from other states have suggested that these brands have helped grow demand for their products. We think that a statewide branding effort coordinated by WSDA could help improve awareness of Washington's unique and diverse agricultural industry. We found that some commissions currently coordinate with each other, and some are open to additional coordination in the future. We think WSDA could help commissions coordinate with each other where it makes sense to improve marketing efforts. We heard from commissions that they need help in navigating complex state requirements, such as contracting through the Department of Enterprise Services. We think WSDA is well positioned to provide additional training and assistance to the commissions in this area. We also found that commissions could use help in maintaining more accurate lists of their producers. During the process of administering the survey, we found that 11% of the addresses provided by the commissions were invalid. WSDA could help the commissions maintain more accurate lists of producers by providing them with updated contact info that they gather through the board nomination and elections process. We made a number of recommendations to WSDA, including create a website with information about each commission, work with commissions to gain producer perspectives through surveys, coordinate a statewide branding effort, help the commissions coordinate among themselves, provide additional training and assistance, and help the commissions maintain more accurate producer lists. We made one recommendation to the commissions to measure and report the results of their programs. This concludes our presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to scan the room for any questions and look online. No one else but myself. I do have a couple of questions. Thank you very much for incredibly clear and easy to follow presentation and go along with the full report. My first question might be an easier one, but it's the one website question. It seemed like WSDA said, well, we have a portal, and then everyone has, well, not everyone, but some have websites that are linked to it. Can you explain why that, how your recommendation differs from what they have today with one portal?
Sure, thank you for the question. Currently, not all commissions have websites, and those that do are pretty diverse. WSDA currently maintains a website that has links to those commissions that do maintain websites, and we think creating one website in one location that has comprehensive information about commission programs, budget, and contact information in one place would be a good resource for both producers and the public.
Thank you. For the record, Executive Committee Member Secretary Representative Orcutt has joined the meeting. Thank you. We're taking questions, and you've doubled the potential for questions on the Agricultural Commodity Commission audit. I have a second question, which I was very concerned about the inaccuracy of information about the growers, members. If people are being assessed, how can we not have accurate information? And secondly, what is the qualification for electors for the board elections, and how is that being maintained if you don't have an accurate list of qualified producers?
Yes, certainly accurate lists of producers are important for the commissions to ensure that they're collecting assessments from producers that they should be, and that they're not assessing folks that are no longer farming or have passed away or have sold their operation. So it is critical for the commissions to have those accurate producer lists. WSDA also uses the producer lists in processes such as board elections and nominations and referenda votes. So it's important for the department as well. And I believe you had a second question.
Well, who's responsible for making sure that the lists are accurate and up to date?
Commissions are responsible for that.
Do they have the capability of doing that, or should that be something that WSDA does? I mean, this goes to the function of whether or not these are democracies. If given our experience with this and the leadership of the state auditor's office on special purpose districts, where we have had serious problems at least with elections and self-determining, self-perpetuating boards, if a set of board commissioners don't want some people to be elected, they shouldn't be in charge of their own electoral role. So is that something that we should look at, having WSDA, and maybe WSDA would like to reply to that?
Yeah, I'll add that statute does require most commissions to maintain lists of producers and provide that to WSDA at certain times for them to complete various functions. And our audit found that the commissions could use help in this area because it's hard for them, particularly for the large commissions to maintain an up-to-date and accurate list at all times. So we think the WSDA can help the commissions in this process by passing along updated information that they gather when they're contacting producers for nominations or elections, and then sharing that with the commissions, and have that be a way for them to support the commissions in maintaining those lists.
Thank you. Representative Orcutt, do you have any? Okay. I think that will, let's see. Does the Department of Agriculture have anyone who'd like to come up to provide a response, or available online? We don't have anyone online, do we? Thank you for joining us today, and please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Chair Paulette, and members of the committee, since Rep. Orcutt has joined us. For the record, my name is Kelly McLean. I'm a policy advisor at the Washington State Department of Agriculture. Next to me is Megan Finkenbinder, the Commodity Commission Administrator for the Department of Agriculture. I'd just like to start off by thanking the performance audit team from the State Auditor's Office that conducted this audit on the commodity commissions. We were pleased to see that the audit acknowledges the importance of agriculture in our state and the necessary role that the commissions play. We have a strong working relationship with our state's agricultural commodity commissions. We oftentimes work very closely with them on issues relevant to their industries, such as up-to-date data, marketing materials, research reports, etc. As the audit indicated, we have statutory obligations to the commissions, and all of these are currently met with one half-time employee who's paid for partially by the commodity commissions themselves. The staff limitation that I mentioned is indicated in RCW 43.23.033. We appreciate the Auditor's Office recognizing the value of the commissions administrator and the potential for expanded support. At this time, we're looking at ways to improve our current processes to better uphold our obligations to the commissions and to help ensure continued success for our agricultural industry. I also wanted to take a second to note that one of the recommendations to be the 44th state to have a state-based location and promotion program is currently moving through this body. House Bill 1603 and 5341 are both moving to create a program like that. And that's all I wanted to share, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Representative Orcutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the folks in the commodity commissions, so the eligible folks that are voting, Are they farmers? Are they processors of foods? Is it both? And then my other question would be, I would guess that there would be some that would be duplicate, that you would have that would be members of multiple commodity commissions, because if you've got somebody that grows apples and cherries and pears, they could be in 3 different commodities, correct?
Correct. I'm going to actually turn that question over to our subject matter expert on that, Megan.
Thank you. As Kelly mentioned, my name's Megan Finkenbinder, and to answer that question, Representative, yes, there are multiple producers, processors that serve multiple industries, and so they would pay into the assessment on each commodity commission.
Would you care to expand on the other 2 questions I asked? First, website, and then improving the quality of information about the qualified members of the commission.
Absolutely. So one thing I wanted to mention, you asked about board member eligibility. So the Department of Agriculture runs the nominations and elections for all 21 commodity commissions. When we receive a nomination, all of those individuals, before they are formally appointed by our director, they go through a certification eligibility. So they actually sign a document that provides, or that has language that's indicated in each commission statute that they certify that they meet those qualifications to serve on that board.
That's the other end of what I was asking about. What I'm asking about is they're nominated by someone, there's an election, and how do you run an election without an up-to-date list of the people who are qualified, which also seems to go to the question of do you have a large segment of people who are freeloading, who aren't paying an assessment and aren't on the rolls?
So that I would have to defer in terms of the lists, the producer lists, to how the commodity commissions. I'm not familiar with how each commission obtains their producer information that they provide to us. So I'm not, that would have to be an individual question of a commission who provides those lists.
Yes, I would really urge you to look at, given the finding by the state auditor that you've got, I didn't write down the number, I forget if it was 11 or 13% of the people they contacted were listed erroneously. That seems to be an area that requires some significant effort. Thank you. Please.
So kind of getting back to the first part of my question, who are the members then that are eligible? Is it the people that are processing the agricultural commodities, or is it the people that are producing, the farmers, or is it both?
It's both. And most commissions have districts, so the state is broken up in districts to ensure geographic representation.
For the record, we've been joined by Representative Gaynor, who has some familiarity probably with multiple commissions. You missed the question from Representative Orcutt about are there people who might be growing pears and apples and be part of 2 or more commissions. But do you have any questions or comments on the audit? Thank you. With that, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? I want to thank you for joining us today. I apologize for having people wait for 30 minutes while the House and Senate floor sessions continued, and appreciate if you could follow up on jointly with the state auditor about the list issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will move to the second item on our agenda, which is the auditor's performance audit on cybersecurity. Opportunities to Improve State Information Technology Security 2022. And please introduce yourselves and take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Joe Clark. I am an IT Security Assistant Audit Manager at the State Auditor's Office. With me today are Scott Frank, Director of Performance and IT Audit at the Auditor's Office, and Quinn Peralta, who's an IT Auditor on our Cybersecurity Audit team. Today, I'll briefly cover some cybersecurity audits we completed in 2022, and then we will also discuss very briefly some additional cybersecurity efforts at the State Auditor's Office. As with before, cybersecurity continues to be an important topic in terms of protecting the state's systems and data. Ransomware continues to attack state and local governments and related organizations nationwide, and we are now seeing new threats to critical infrastructure organizations around the country, partially in response to the war in Ukraine, or partially as an attributable factor to the war in Ukraine. So that is sort of the nature of the evolving situation of cybersecurity, both in Washington and around the country. In response to that, what our office does are cybersecurity performance audits of state agencies and local governments. These audits are intended to identify opportunities for those organizations to improve their security and are done free of charge. They generally include two components. Those include penetration testing of an agency's applications and network segments, as well as an evaluation of those organizations' IT security controls, again, looking for areas of opportunity. This last year, we also started an audit of critical infrastructure organizations in Washington state, again, in response to the heightened threats against those types of organizations. It was more narrow in scope. It focused primarily on a little bit of penetration testing as well as an open source intelligence assessment. In a few moments, Quinn will discuss that line of efforts as well. With our 2022 cybersecurity audits, both of state agencies and local governments, this brings our total of state agencies audited to date to 34. That includes three organizations, 3 state agencies that we've audited twice so far. We've also audited 38 local governments to date. And in 2022 alone, we did our critical infrastructure cybersecurity audit at 20 state agencies. We also have a number of audits underway at the state level, the local level, and among the critical infrastructure organizations. I'll now provide a brief overview of our 2022 state cybersecurity audit, as well as how it folds into our broader portfolio of cybersecurity audits. Before that, I want to take a quick moment to thank the leadership, IT management, and staff at all 4 agencies in the cybersecurity audit. Our audit takes time away from their staff to do their regularly assigned duties, so we really want to thank them for the time they put into it. We also want to thank the Office of Cybersecurity, as well as their representatives and management for their assistance on these audits. In 2022, our audit of state agencies included 4 agencies. 2 were large in size, 1 was a medium-sized agency, 1 was a small agency. One of the large agencies, as well as the small agency, both volunteered for this audit, so we're happy to have volunteers for these engagements. And as with the other audits, it included penetration testing and an evaluation of their security controls. I want to remind members of the committee that under state law, the detailed results of our assessments are confidential. So for that reason, we only share that detailed information with the respective agencies, with the exception of the State Office of Cybersecurity, with whom we also provide some detailed information, some detailed results to individuals that have a need to know. As an added precaution, we also keep the agency's identities confidential. As I mentioned before, we did penetration testing of the state agencies. That's performed by contractors with oversight by our auditors and security specialists. Since 2017, our total gambit of audits have found nearly 2,700 vulnerabilities. Of that, over 670 have been critical or high severity in nature. These are the most severe ones that could immediately impact an organization, take systems offline, disrupt government services, et cetera. We also evaluated agencies' security practices against the CIS controls, which are leading practices, again, looking for opportunities for agencies to improve their security. We scope both the penetration testing and the controls assessments collaboratively. We want to focus on areas that are of most importance to those agencies. We don't want to just look at a compliance assessment. Instead, this is looking for what makes the most sense for each agency based on their priorities, their mission-critical systems, et cetera. These are a sample of the areas that were considered for each of those audits. And we communicated the results of the audits to each agency's IT management and staff. Again, we tried to provide detailed results. That way they could know ways in which they could specifically improve their security. And agency management reported using those results to inform improvements in their security programs. So with that, I'll hand it over to Quinn Peralta to discuss our 2022 critical infrastructure audit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joe. As Joe mentioned before, my name is Quinn Peralta. I'm an IT auditor on our cybersecurity team at the Washington State Auditor's Office. Today, I will be discussing the ways our team is helping improve IT security at critical infrastructure organizations and how this new line of work came about. In January of 2022, CISA, the FBI, and NSA all released a joint advisory saying that Russian state-sponsored threat actors were targeting industries such as defense, energy, water, sewer, nuclear organizations in the United States and other Western nations. Where possible for this audit, we included external stakeholders in our scoping process, including the Energy Emergency Management Director from the Department of Commerce and the Cybersecurity and Critical Infrastructure Manager for the Washington State Military Department's Emergency Management Division. The connections that we have with our state stakeholders allowed us to present this audit in front of these local governments and expand our communication to a broader audience, making sure that we hit these different sectors. The purpose of the audit was to find opportunities to help entities improve their external security posture and in turn help protect against those malicious cyber attacks. With that in mind, our audit fieldwork was designed to hit multiple areas. First, we conducted attestation interviews with key IT personnel to identify areas of improvement for those industrial control systems. Following those conversations with the entities, we provided each entity with a tailored set of strengths and opportunities, as well as a list of best practices put forth by CISA. Next, we worked with contracted subject matter experts to conduct penetration testing of the entity's internet-facing assets. This testing was used to determine if there were any vulnerabilities that an attacker anywhere in the world could use and leverage to gain access into the entity's environment. Another component of testing that we coordinated was the Open Source Intelligence Assessment, which we call OSINT. The OSINT assessment looked for any publicly available information that may make the entity a juicy target, such as passwords dumped in a known data breach or something like that. Our goal for these three components was to narrow the scope of the audit with the intention to be quicker than our standard cybersecurity audits while still offering a comprehensive service that could help entities increase defenses. At the time of this presentation, our team has completed 20 critical infrastructure engagements and we have 16 in progress. These entities have already begun addressing significant issues that we've identified, and they continue to make improvements based on the provided results. The results also provided us with some interesting findings, such as the OSINT report identified instances where employees were using government email addresses for third-party application accounts. Those accounts would then show up in a known data breach, and that password would be connected there. That password would be breached from that account. If that password was still valid for that account, it could be used to breach the entity's environment. So this tells us why multi-factor authentication is so important. That way, if that password is valid and it does work with that government email address, users still have another layer of protection. During the external penetration test, our subject matter experts also identified 122 total vulnerabilities on the entity's internet-facing systems. This number spans not just the critical infrastructure systems that are public-facing, but also things like websites and databases. Our team is happy to help ease the burden in any way that we can by providing best practices, the results, and practical starting points for these local entities. And now I will hand it over to our director, Scott Frank, to discuss the other cybersecurity efforts put forth by our office.
Thanks, Quinn. So I'm Scott Frank. I'm the Director of Performance and IT Audit here at the State Auditor's Office. I do want to talk very briefly about some of the other work that we do besides our performance audits in the cybersecurity realm. However, because we're pressed for time, I'm just going to summarize what's in the last few slides within this deck. What we've tried to do is leverage. We've got some tremendous expertise that we've developed at the State Auditor's Office, of folks like Joe and Quinn, and we want to take that knowledge and our connections with all of the local governments in the state and try and broaden our reach to get to more entities. And so we've come up with some additional ways besides the fuller cybersecurity audits that we do. We've identified certain topics that we can incorporate into routine audits that are conducted by our financial auditors, who conduct routine audits every 1 to 3 years at local governments to at least do a little bit of cyber work in those spaces. We've designed procedures whenever a local government, a state agency or a local government is hit with what we call cyber loss, where basically usually through email phishing, they're tricked into diverting a payment to a fraudster, we have some procedures to go in and make sure we understand what happened and how to fix, make sure that those things have been fixed. We also have a group that publishes resources and tries to make those available to local governments and gives them some small on-site consulting just to try and help, especially our smallest local governments, get a toehold within cybersecurity. And so there's more information about those efforts in the last few slides of the deck, but I think in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and stop there, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Sorry that we are pressed for time because this topic deserves more time, not less. Representative Orcutt or Representative Gaynor, do either of you have questions? Please, Representative Gaynor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of curious. I mean, do you guys have hackers on staff that make the best efforts? And I don't mean that, you know, I'm kind of kidding about that, but I mean, when you're doing a cybersecurity thing, is that part of it, though, to do everything you can to try and break through another system?
Yes, thank you for your question. We do have contractors that do that line of work, hacking, so to speak, ethical hacking. It's done above board. We communicate fully with the organizations we're auditing. We enter into rules of engagement with them. That way, everybody is aware of what we're testing. So while the audit work is itself confidential, we're sure to involve the appropriate stakeholders. The controls assessment, though, is done fully in-house with our own auditors and security specialists. So those are the two distinct bodies of work that we do for our standard audits.
I have a couple of questions. One is, I didn't see in the report, and it may be because it's a security issue, but I'm curious about whether or not our agency leadership at all state agencies conduct tabletop exercises, and are there specific standards for them, best practices, so that if there is a ransomware incident, we aren't delayed in responding because leadership has never confronted what they would do under X, Y, or Z?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, an evaluation of tabletop exercises or incident response more broadly was not generally in the scope of this audit. However, I can say that that area of IT security is included in the state's IT security standards. That does apply to virtually all state agencies with only a few exceptions. For local governments, I'm unaware of a comparable set of requirements that applies across the board. Local governments that have certain types of data, for example, criminal justice information, may have similar requirements, but more generally speaking, I'm unaware of requirements that apply broadly to Washington state local governments in that specific area.
Well, you touched on the next question I was going to go to, and as with an interest in local government, whether or not there is any resource available to the state to train local governments, some of which, of course, are running massive critical infrastructure programs such as major public utilities. Is there a state resource for that, or is that something outside your scope?
I'll take that. So I think it's a bit patchwork for local governments, and this is why, as the state auditor's office, we've tried to step in with some of the alternative things that we're able to do beyond just the performance audits, because we have some level of cybersecurity expertise, and because we're one of the few state agencies, maybe the only one, that it really has an ongoing relationship with every local government because of our financial audits, and so we've tried to leverage that to bring some more guidance. We do a lot. We have a Center for Government Innovation that its job is to push leading practices out to local governments. So they go through and sort of curate what's out there in the world as far as cybersecurity guidance, and without trying to reinvent the wheel, identify things like that would be a good resource that would help local governments. We catalog it, and we try and encourage local governments to take a look at the things that we've identified. When we identify free services that are out there that are available for local governments to use, we encourage them to take advantage of those. But I would still say it's a bit of a patchwork in terms of who's able to provide assistance to those local governments. And we think that's probably is where there's some of the biggest need is at the local level.
Thank you. Any other questions? We need to wrap up. One last question I've got is, I know there have been concerns about former employees and multi-factor authentication. Do we have standards to ensure that people are not using their personal phone but using an agency-issued phone for multi-factor authentication and it's turned off when they leave an agency? Is that something that you review?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Chair. Controlling accounts is part of our review on occasion, depending on the scope of work. Device control is also part of our review, again, depending on the scope of work. I can tell you that most organizations have processes to make sure that their devices are brought back in-house prior to termination of an employee or termination of that relationship. As far as what's in the standards, I believe there is some about that, but I'll defer to the Office of Cybersecurity for further details on what's required of state agencies in that specific regard.
We need to ask the office to come up to respond quickly because we need to be out in a couple of minutes. Thank you very, very much for presenting. And please come up and introduce yourself, and then we're going to adjourn in 4 minutes.
Chair and members of the committee, my name is Ralph Johnson. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Washington and head of the Office of Cybersecurity. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. WATEC appreciates the work of the State Auditor's Office to improve the state's cybersecurity posture and the SAO's collaborative approach to completing the performance audit report entitled Opportunities to Improve State Information Technology Security for 2022. We also appreciate the State Auditor's Office recognition within the report that the audited agencies have already taken steps to address the findings of the audit and will continue to do so. The state must remain vigilant and continue to strengthen our cybersecurity posture in government, on our government systems and data. To that end, the SAO's audit work is an important foundational element of the state's cybersecurity response and assists WATEC's Office of Cybersecurity in our statutory obligations to monitor statewide cybersecurity risks. We continue to welcome the State Auditor's Office observations and recommendations for improvement, excuse me. That concludes my comments for today. I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee.
And do we have any questions? I would ask you to, in the interest of time, if you would share any response you have to the questions that I asked a few minutes ago to the State Auditor's Office, just sharing it as time allows with the committee, that would be much appreciated.
Certainly. Okay. With regard to the question related to multi-factor authentication, to the extent of my knowledge, I will let you know that I've only been with the state for 2 months, so I'm still getting oriented to a lot of things. But it's my understanding that multi-factor authentication is allowed on both state-issued and personal mobile devices for the authenticator protocol. However, once an account is disabled within the systems, that multi-factor authentication is automatically revoked, and whatever device they have the application on will no longer allow authentication, whether it's a personal device or a state device. And it's also my understanding that state-issued devices are returned to the agency upon the employee's departure.
Thank you very much.
That is the one question that I recall you asking, so if you'd like
the
to
other
repeat the other one.
would be how to provide assistance with tabletop exercises and other in particular. And that's something we need to wrap right now because the next committee will be coming in.
We'll be happy to get back to you on that one then, sir.
Thank you kindly. Thank you all for coming. And again, sorry for the delay in beginning the hearing today. And with that, the committee is adjourned.